So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Thank you for coming. Just like to read over some brief notes here first. I'm Dan Kaminski, the committee chair for the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee. Would like to stress to everyone that the meetings are being recorded. And is there anyone online, James? Do we know?
Not at the moment, no.
Not at the moment. So everyone online would be able to hear you as well, and they would be recorded for the record. So please keep the sidebar conversations to a minimum. There will be a public comment period, and if anyone has signed up, we'll gladly participate at that point. However, this is a working committee, so you are welcome to actually join the table and join the discussion. And if anyone has not signed the sign-in sheets, which I think Chelsea was nice enough to give me it, so I think I'm signed in. And please, everyone in the room, participate. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Zach for your update.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Todd. I'm your point of contact for the Strategic and Legacy Management. A couple updates for you. EM1 is now confirmed, so I won't be able to come up with the standard reason of why we can't give you a strategic plan. Dan, I figure you'd be happy to hear that. We were up in DC last week. John Lopez, Sharon Ash, and myself were able to kind of get a feel for headquarters and what all the plan is as far as the strategic vision for the site, or for the EM. They got a little bit of work to do. They're trying to figure out some things. What they're trying to do is actually come up with so new EM1, everyone's going to kind of put their vision in place and want to put their vision in place. She's kind of looking across everything and trying to figure out which way she wants to go. So I say all that to say this, we think a strategic plan will be coming. We don't know what that's going to look like or what the path is going to be. So I imagine from whatever strategic plan comes down, we'll have to do some adjustments from ours where we had on the shelf from about a year and a half ago. So more to come, but she has mentioned it. I know it's a priority for her to kind of come up with a strategic vision. What form that is, we don't have much idea yet. So in other news, I'm sure you guys have heard now that the fiscal year 18 budget has been passed, so yay. It was fairly good news for the site. Overall, I think we received about a $30 million plus up, primarily in liquid waste. Then kind of leading into fiscal year 19, the President's budget's been released as well. So you can go online and actually look at that. Again, looking fairly good for right now. Again, it's a presidential release. It's nothing like official or kind of going back and it's official. It's just we got a long way to go before we get the actual dollars. But that's actually looking fairly promising. Some of the big keynotes is if you look in liquid waste, there's about $130 million plus up within liquid waste from 17 to 19, 18 to 19 rather. So again, if it all works out and the 19 presidential budget kind of comes down to the site in its current form, it's a pretty big win for the site. So we started working on the 20 budget formulation just now. We pretty much have our first pass with it that we gave to headquarters. Nothing like of note yet, and as we get some more information in, we're allowed to release some of that stuff, we will. But we started working on the fiscal year 20 budget as well. Lastly, a fairly big milestone is probably going to be not a milestone the way that we typically talk about milestones, but I guess a personal milestone. The military, I've talked several times about the 750 acres with a permit for the military to come on the site, and actually the idea is they're going to build some buildings and actually have a presence on the site. Next week, we'll have General Owens down, and it's kind of expected we'll have the military permit run through our concurrence process and be able to kind of sign and take some pictures and take advantage of that. So that'll be a pretty big news for the site. It's a new tenant and all the things that kind of come on with it. And then long way from buildings being built there, but it's a start. They'll actually be able to start putting it into their request and hopefully receive funding for it, and we'll see some of the benefits for that later on. So any questions?
Let's go around the table. Dave?
Zach, thank you. I guess one thing that I looked at today, I went out on several of the department and agency websites in the executive branch, and I noticed that most of their strategic plans have been posted online, but I noticed that Department of Energy has not. Did you hear anything? I guess that's the reason that EM is waiting. Did you hear anything as to what the status is of the department strategic plan?
No. So I know the Department of Energy's plan was last approved in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So a little bit of assumption on my part here. They're going to comply with the law that states that. Our Secretary Perry, he's been in for a little bit, so I would suspect that's coming down the pipe sooner rather than later. There's always this lag with a new leader. They want to try to get the understanding of what's going on, and then they'll put out their vision. So there's nothing I've heard to say that that's not going to come out, or so I don't know how much that answers your question.
And just one more question, please.
Sure.
The FY18 budget.
Correct.
It looks like, if I am reading this correctly, that you got the full 18 president's budget for EM?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the plus and takes, but there's some small fluctuations between the PBSs and stuff like that. But in general, we got 30 more million than the president's request.
Thank you.
Doug?
Doug Howard, Cap. Zach, you said that the military is getting how much land for usage?
Yeah. So how much land for the permit, or how much land for use? Use. If I recall, it's up to about 180,000 acres of the site is available for military training, but for land that's for permit for that, we'll call it South Carolina National Guard Island that they're going to, quote unquote, own and manage. It's 750. They won't own it. It's a permitting process. The land will always be DOE's, but they're actually going to have their own little enclave that they'll manage. So that's how that works.
And it'll be strictly for the National Guard reserves, or?
Not strictly for the National Guard. I don't believe you've been a member of the board when I've done a military update, but we actually have a lot of military units that come in and do training on the site. A lot of special forces, special operation units, a lot of CAG guys, the higher tier folks. Not so much on the conventional side. We've had engineers come in and do projects on the site before. We've had a couple aviation units that come in and do some training, but primarily on the special operations side. They're in D area, looking at the powerhouse, the pump house, and we've had some units in the CBRNE type side, the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive guys, come in and do some exercises with the CRA reactor, kind of looking at that, and then down at Gunsite 51 with some of the training that the National Lab puts on for us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, just a couple questions on my end.
Sure.
Do we have, this is Dan Kaminski, Cap, do we have any timeline for the strategic plan at all, or is it just we have to wait and see? Yeah,
so, believe it or not, we kind of went back and forth with the EM headquarters folks when we were up there in DC. Hey, this is something, in our exact words, this is something that our community is very interested in, seeing like what our strategic plan is going to be. And for that to happen, you said you guys have to put forward your strategic plan, and they understood that. But the end of the story is like they're going to allow EM1 the opportunity to kind of assess the situation and figure out what her vision is for EM. I know that's not the best answer, but unfortunately that's
the one you got.
Yeah.
On the 2019 budget, so is that a stable EM mission funding, and is that also inclusive of the beginning of the spike of the pension issue?
Rephrase the question just a little bit different.
Do you have enough money to cover our EM mission as it sits today, plus the beginning of the spike of the pensions?
Yeah, so I can't go into a lot of details with 19, but the reality is no matter what the budget year, there's always scope that you'll get done, and there's always going to be some scope that won't get done. That's just the reality of it. You look at 18, yeah, we got our request. There's still some stuff out there that we would take, given the money, we would like to go do and accomplish. So that's about all I can really elaborate for 19.
And then on the military coming on board, so just maybe give some of our newer members a little sense of some of the potential of additional missions that they could assist us with. I know they've helped us with the ash basin covering and earth removal and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Do we kind of have a laundry list of things we'd like to see them do over time?
Oh, absolutely. There's a list. So last year, obviously we didn't have a project. There was a lot of things that go into it with all the natural disasters and these folks being deployed and eating up their 2 weeks of annual training. And we're competing with engineer assets, and these are the same folks that kind of go into after natural disasters, kind of fix things up. So they're in high demand, and unfortunately the past couple of years there's been a lot of natural disasters that they've had to deploy and mobilize towards. So from that, after the 288F ash basin that they completed, which was about $2 million worth of scope, which was the second year that we brought them on, we went out and created pretty much ready off the shelf, like, hey, here's our shopping list. Which one of these are interesting to you?
Which one you'd like to train on?
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of funny. For a while, myself and Tommy Striblin, he's our liaison down at the site for the South Carolina National Guard. We were going to units and pretty much pitching it, and like, this is our sales pitch. Come train at Savannah River site. And with the help, I believe that was your organization at the time, Dave Bender created a list that I think there was about 15 projects that were ready to go. So that was extremely helpful. Unfortunately, circumstances kind of overtook it, and we're hoping that kind of picks back up. You want me to kind of go into a little bit more detail about the relationship?
Do either of you? I mean, you're relatively new to the cab.
No? Okay.
All right.
I don't
Thank
have
you.
to talk.
Any other questions? Doug, your card's back up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I do. Doug Howard Cab.
Now that you mention
Never missed that opportunity. But just one more question. The reserves of the National Guard, they have work that they do for the site. Now, do you get the active duty folks at all to do any type? I mean, are they involved in any way, or can they be implemented in any way?
We've tried and haven't had good success yet. There's the potential there. There's no we call it training, by the way. It's not work.
Right.
Yeah. There's no like obstacle. It's just, well, there's obstacles, but there's no like, thou shall not use this unit for this type scenario. It's just more of, again, that sales pitching and attracting an active duty unit. Now we've came fairly close, but unfortunately we just really just weren't able to close the deal with some of the active duty units. We were looking with some of the engineers down at Fort Stewart, 3rd ID at the time. Their commander decided to just kind of go somewhere else with it.
Okay.
But so for the engineering projects, it's been predominantly South Carolina National Guard. For the training on the site was mostly active duty units, and that's kind of that actually utilized the land. Now the hopes is after the 750 acres is kind of transferred over to the National Guard, and they kind of build out, they have a master plan, and that'll actually be coming up through a NEPA document that they'll have to release, and you'll be able to see it then. At that point, I think I can say this, they'll be able to support up to a battalion at the site, housing, facilities, all that of that nature. So anywhere from 300 to 750 folks. So it's a pretty big deal, and we think that along with the land and some with the unique facilities, you kind of look at you just look at different events going on throughout the world, and then, okay, what do we have on the site? We have 1950s nuclear technology. It's a pretty big interest to a lot of folks in the military. We have a lot of generals that are constantly coming on the site, touring the facilities, looking at stuff. We had the cyber commander actually come on site 2 weeks ago, last week. I might have put you on the spot and you might not know. But sorry,
It's
but
above
he
his
actually.
pay grade.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there's a lot of interest in the site and the capabilities, especially at the lab. So once we get some of these support facilities, we really think it's going to grow, because just since I've been here, and I don't think it's a reflection on me, but just kind of like the natural growth of it. Since South Carolina National Guard took over, we went from training about like 200-300 soldiers in a given year, airmen and Marines and sailors, all the way up to, I think last year we were well over 2,500, 2,800, somewhere around there. So it's grown quite a bit.
And that was going to be one of my questions was, has the Commanding General of Fort Gordon ever toured the site?
I don't know if when you say commanding general, do you talking about the garrison commander, or are you talking about like the signal commander?
The signal commander, the 2-star general that commands.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's been the signal commander, but we've had the cyber commander, and he's a 2-star. So he's been out on the site. I know we've had the garrison commander. We have a lot of like interagency agreements with them, with emergency services and things of that nature. He's been out on site and vice versa. We've had some leadership go back on site, back to Fort Gordon, kind of look at some of the things that they're doing. So there is that dialogue that's kind of going on.
And they have a lot of visiting generals that come to Fort Gordon, and it may not be a bad idea to offer that tour for some of them that come in from the various other commands around the Army and the other services.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think about a year and a half ago, I was up in D.C. specifically for the South Carolina National Guard and Savannah River site kind of coming together to make this available. And there's a 3-star General Cadave, who's at the Department of Army at the time. I think he's since moved on, but they were working on trying to schedule some of those higher level visits to kind of show people like the land that's available here, into some of the facilities that we have. Just unfortunately, it just hasn't happened yet. But we've had several generals that have toured the site within the cyber realm. We've had South Carolina National Guard's entire chain of command. We've had generals in the past from Fort Gordon. They're starting to become very well aware, but and it's also kind of like a grassroots movement. We've had a lot of folks come here and train over the past couple of years. And the good news is once they transfer units, well, we're getting some of those guys that have trained here before. They take this knowledge, this like, hey, Savannah River site's over here, and they bring this up, and we're receiving more guys. So you'll probably see this exponential growth as folks becoming more aware. Unfortunately, it's not like we can slab on like a little billboard up in D.C. come train at Savannah River site. So it kind of takes some time to get that momentum. But we've been looking at a lot of that stuff exactly what you're talking about. But DOE doesn't lobby that so much. We've kind of put that on the South Carolina National Guard as our custodian, sort of say.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bobbie?
Bobbie Williams, Cab. GTI is doing some training too, right there on the borderline
Yeah.
of Savannah River site. Did you all get any feedback from the loud explosion they had last year? Last week or two ago?
So I'm familiar. There was a lot of explosion
It
at
was
GTI.
a big discussion in Barnwell County.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm kind of unfamiliar with the situation, but I'll kind of describe the relationship we have with GTI. And I think it'll kind of answer your question. So Tommy Striblin, he, again, our point of contact with South Carolina National Guard. Anytime there's a military training where loud noises and stuff will be heard, there's a process we go to kind of notify the best we can the local community. And there's a whole distribution list that goes out to surrounding counties and stuff. Now what happens after that's, I don't really know. I've never gone to like knocking on a door in Barnwell County, did you get this notification? So I can't tell you the effectiveness of that, but we do distribute that. Now, I know GTI, there's a lot of coordination with Tommy Striblin and stuff because, our pro force, they're sensitive to explosions in the near area. So there is a communication that goes back and forth. I want to say it's 100% with GTI. I don't know that, but I feel Tommy Striblin actually kind of facilitates that dialogue quite a bit. I hear him informing security folks quite often on it.
And GTI is Government Training Institute.
Yeah, it's Government Training Institute, but it's not government. It's private. They do government training. They get a lot of really the same type folks that we have training at Savannah River site. In fact, there was a training about 2 months ago where they actually came through our site. They landed their helicopters. They kind of marched in and they actually, will say, assaulted the target on GTI. So there's been that coordination in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Thank you, Zach.
I like it. I mean, you guys were. I like it. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah, we're here to please. Yeah, that's my goal in life. So moving into our recommendation updates, we have one open, number 346, drone spotting over SRS. So just if anyone hadn't refreshed their memories on this particular open recommendation, the only thing that was not accepted was ongoing reporting back to the cab. I don't generally disagree with that position because they're not here to report to us on something of that nature. But I'm thinking this one is more than likely done. So is there any further discussion on the response, or do I have a motion to move this to the full board for closure? Go ahead, Dave.
Dave Vovakes, cab. I don't know whether it's too late or not. I noticed when I
Never
read
too
the
late.
recommendation online today, I noticed there was one typo in there. Does that, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion on it, does anyone have a motion to move for closure?
So moved.
Have a second? Seconded. So we will now vote on moving this to the full board. So by showing of your right hand, if you are in favor of moving this to the full board for voting for closure, please raise your right hand. Okay, Gil. Okay. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. So we'll move that one to May's board meeting. And we also have a pending recommendation, number 351, Savannah River National Lab funding. I think the last update we had was that one was getting close to having a
You
response.
can expect that in your inbox in the morning. I got the response this afternoon.
It is a conspiracy
before
theory.
this started, so-
We get them the day after the meetings.
So you'll be able to discuss that one coming up soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if everyone could please prepare for our next committee meeting with regards to 351 to read up on their response and obviously come prepared to comment on pros and cons to what we receive. Okay, so that moves us into reviewing our previous committee meeting discussions and actions. And that brings up the presentation that we received at the last full board meeting, the SR Archaeology Research Program. We have a copy in front of you. It was quite a lengthy presentation. It was very entertaining and quite interesting. And so I don't know if anyone has looked into it any further. I do have some initial comments on it, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And I do want to give them a plug. They have an excellent website at www.srarp.org, and they also are on Facebook. So if you explore anything within that, they have a lot of outreach programs, a lot of good information about the history of the site, both historic and prehistoric. It was quite interesting. I spent some time on their website recently, and I am bound and determined to find a computer that I can watch the film Discovering Dave. It's about 49 minutes long, and it's about a once slave pottery maker in the area and a lot of the artifacts that they've found in the region. So,
I may have a DVD for you.
oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. There are links online on that, but like I said, it was 49 minutes, and depending on the format, I couldn't do it where I was at the time. So I probably can do it on my phone, but I don't want to do that. And also, they put out an annual report. The current annual report online is the 2016 annual report, and it does have a lot of stuff that clearly shows what that organization does. I had always had somewhat of a less than positive view of that type of activity, but understanding that it was designed and created with us taxpayers in mind to preserve the history and to really have a common understanding of what has happened and what we've given up to have what we have today. So I found it very intriguing. I will be asking and looking deeper because on that annual report, there is a listing in the back on the last probably 10 pages of it with these little juicy tidbits of research abstracts that they've presented all over the country. And some of the titles and the paragraph that they have for you to bite into, quite interesting stuff. So I would encourage anyone listening and has any remote interest in the history of the site to plug into their website, because they've done a fantastic job of having a lot of resources there. So a long-winded saying, I was interested. What does the rest of the committee think? What are some of the comments, questions, or ideas we have coming out of that?
You did a good job of explaining it. Everyone likes it.
So I did learn another very interesting part is that he goes by Buddy.
He does.
He does. So he was being very formal with us. But anyway, reading this, I was trying to see were there any cracks or chinks that they may need our assistance from a form of recommendation. But in all honesty, the way it's funded and the way it's mandated by the governance over the site, it looks and appears that they've got everything in order. Do we or anyone on DOE side know anything to the contrary on that? Okay.
How does the curation facility work?
I don't exactly know. I do know that they get some of the artifacts to it. So
Avery Hammett, DOE. The curation facility is split between the Cold War Preservation Program and the Archaeology Program, which is the prehistory. So they share the big warehouse space between the two organizations. It's usually actually in Buddy's office. Yeah, he likes to keep it close.
he uses it as a spittoon, right?
It's his umbrella stand. No,
Umbrella
just kidding.
stand.
Just kidding.
Loves that pot.
He does. He really does.
He loves that pot.
I also looked online. You can't find any of it for sale.
Yeah.
So very intriguing. I don't think you'd be allowed to. It's probably not his personal pot. Okay, so any further discussion on this topic? Anyone else have any ideas on recommendations regarding this presentation? Okay. Are there any open discussion items not regarding anything that was presented? Does anyone have any specific questions or any thought provokers for future recommendations? Bringing caffeinated something to the next meeting, and you're all gonna drink it. You drink the Kool-Aid, go. No, that's okay. That being said, are there any public sign up? Okay, so this is gonna be a fast, very concise meeting here today. What's that? Sure. Let's debate that. Let's stay in front of that. Okay, I didn't think so. All right, so if there's no other comments, questions, or concerns, I move this meeting to be adjourned.